Greetings, I am Mr. O'Neill and I teach English Language Arts online in Washington State. Let's talk about structure fire versus wildland fire. Both of these are career paths that one can pursue after high school. Sometimes students during high school can volunteer at their local fire departments. And on the left, you'll see a photo of me with my brother at DNR, which is short for Department of Natural Resources in Washington State. On the right, I am pictured by myself with Patrick Corporation, which is a private wildland firefighting company. And I was with Patrick from 2014 to 2016, 3 years. And I was with DNR for 4 years, from 2017 to 2020. I've got two logos shown for DNR because both of those logos were used when I was at DNR. And let's talk about the general fire triangle first. It's important to note that all three of these elements must be present in order for fire to ignite and sustain over time. So oxygen, fuel, and a heat source. And oxygen is obvious. We breathe oxygen. This is also why wind is so important, because the more wind one adds to a fire, then the more intense the fire will be, because the fire is receiving more O2 with more wind. Fuel would include grass, shrubs, trees, couches, houses, you name it. A heat source would include lightning, exhaust from cars and tall grass. If someone fires a round from a firearm, and as that round exits the firearm and collides with a rock, then that collision between the round and the rock would cause a spark, and that spark can cause a fire. So there are many ways to cause fires. And heat source would also include temperature. So the hotter it is, then the more extreme fire behavior one will see. The colder it is, the less extreme fire behavior one will see. On the subject of fire behavior, topography, fuel, and weather all are involved in the severity, intensity, duration, size of wildfires. So topography would include things like rock screes, rivers, streams, creeks, parking lots. All of those things don't have fuel and would slow down fire, but fire can still cross over streams, creeks, parking lots, roads. Those types of things would slow down a fire, but not necessarily stop a fire altogether. Fuel would include trees, grass. It has to be combustible material. Couches. Weather would include relative humidity, because relative humidity measures the moisture content of the atmosphere. So for example, it's not uncommon for the American West to have very low relative humidity in the single digits or lower tens. So 8, 9%, 10%, 11% would all be considered a very big watch out situation for extreme fire behavior. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, if the relative humidity or measurement of moisture in the atmosphere is measured at 70% or 80%, then one will see much lower fire behavior. Before we get into definitions, I think it'd be good to see some pictures first. So on the left, you'll see these structure firefighters are decked out in their bunker gear with their breathing apparatuses. They've got full PPE. PPE is short for personal protective equipment. And you can see at the bottom, it looks like they're practicing in a burn shelter. This looks like a practice demonstration. And then on the right, you'll notice these wildland firefighters are decked out with their green Nomex. Nomex is a term to describe fire-resistant clothing that firefighters wear in the wildland context. So they've got their Nomex green pants, they've got their Nomex long-sleeved yellow shirts, they've got their hard hats, sometimes also called helmets, which can come in a variety of colors: white, yellow, blue, red. It doesn't really matter. The one commonality you'll notice with wildland firefighters is they always have green pants, usually cargo green pants, and long sleeve yellow shirts. Although this yellow shirt will turn to a black or a gray color. If they have a lot of ash on it, it would be almost unrecognizable. Also, wildland firefighters are always supposed to have leather gloves on when they are in the wildland. And this is a small inaccuracy here because you can see this lady does not have her gloves on like she should. And it looks like they are conducting a burnout operation or perhaps a prescribed fire because this lady is holding a drip torch right here. So this drip torch is dripping out a little bit of fuel, and the fuel is igniting a wick. You can see here there's a wick at the end of the drip torch, and there's just a little bit of fire that drips out of that wick, and they conduct and facilitate a prescribed fire on this landscape. Prescribed fires that are very low intensity like this will help make this landscape more resistant to future wildfires because future wildfires will not have as much fuel to burn through. Remember on the previous slides when we talked about fuel being a factor in fire behavior as well as the fire triangle, you'll notice that fuel is a commonality in the fire triangle and fire behavior. As one reduces the amount of fuel on the ground with these prescribed fires, future fires in the same area will be less intense because there will be less fuel to burn through. These prescribed fires normally entail very low fire behavior like this, where flame lengths are less than 3 feet, ideally. If flame lengths are more than 3 feet in height, then that is the threshold where firefighters have to back off. These firefighters in this picture, they are constructing what is called handline. So you can see where they are digging down to bare mineral soil. If the fire is going to be here on this side, you can see that the fire is going to burn up through this vegetation, and then it will stop burning when it reaches this bare mineral soil because, once again, it has run out of fuel to burn, and then the fire will go out when it reaches this bare mineral soil right here. So let's talk about structure fire, wildland, and wildland fire. All 4 of these terms have different meanings. So structure normally refers to commercial structures or residential structures. Structure can also refer to cars, buses, trains, airplanes, other enclosed or unenclosed structures. Structure fire is more encompassing. Structure fire refers to hazardous material mitigation, structure fire suppression, rescue, providing emergency medical service, and fire-wise preparedness in the context of structure fire. This last piece, fire-wise preparedness, this is an important piece of structure fire. So if one has questions about the potential for carbon monoxide poisoning in one's house, or if one has questions about the shrubs being planted too close next to one's house, or if one has questions about fire detectors or smoke detectors, heat detectors, anything like that, anything that has to do with preparedness and fire safety in the context of structure fire, that's where your local fire department can help homeowners or community members. So fire-wise preparedness is important. Wildland just refers to uncultivated, undeveloped, or protected lands. This would include a wide variety of landscapes. And wildland fire is more encompassing. So wildland fire encompasses wildfire suppression, prescribed fire, managing ecosystems, fire-wise preparedness in the context of wildland fire. We will talk more about fire-wise preparedness in the context of wildland fire in a little bit. Ecosystem is normally defined as the intersection of biological organisms and their physical environment or habitat. This is important for wildland fire because wildland firefighters are in the natural landscape, which means wildland firefighters are interacting with ecosystems. These are systems or places that already have existing biological organisms living in habitats. And prescribed fires, like the one that I showed you on the previous slide, prescribed fires like this one down here, These very low intensity prescribed fires can actually help animals or other organisms live in a healthier forest and healthier habitat because the fuels are being reduced and lowering the probability of an intense fire coming through later. So wildland firefighters very much manage ecosystems through prescribed fire, manage ecosystems through thinning and pruning, fuels mitigation, anything like that. Structure fire, some but not all structure firefighters will respond to wildland fires, so there's a little bit of overlap here. In the American West, some structure firefighters will engage in wildland fires, but not all. On the East Coast, it's very uncommon to see structure firefighters engage in wildland fire. That almost never happens. Wildland firefighters do not engage in direct attack on structure fires, but indirect attack is possible. So we'll talk about that a little bit on the next slides as far as indirect attack that wildland firefighters can engage in for structure fires. Wildland firefighters do receive very basic training in providing emergency medical service, EMS, but that training is less rigorous than EMS training structure firefighters receive. Generally, structure firefighters do have a very predictable schedule, which makes it very possible to raise a family and have a life outside of work. However, wildland firefighters are away from home for weeks or even months at a time during the summer months, which is pretty hard on family relationships. So something else to think about. You can see here in this picture, we have a low intensity fire, and these trees look healthy. They have not torched up. Torching is a term that refers to fire running from the base all the way to the crown of the tree. That has not occurred here. These trees look healthy. And there's some good spacing between these trees as well. So let's talk a little bit about differences between structure fire and wildland fire. And I've highlighted here to help with color coding. So yellow is wildland, blue is structure, green is a similarity between the two. So both wildland and structure, they both use PPE, personal protective equipment. Usually structure firefighters are in buildings, although not always. We talked about the possibility of being in cars, trains, etc. Wildland firefighters are in open landscapes. We will talk more about direct attack and indirect attack in the next slides. Usually structure firefighters are holding down year-round positions, and seasonal firefighters are holding down seasonal positions. But it is possible that some wildland jobs are year-round and some structure jobs are volunteer or seasonal based. In the West, some structure fire departments will hire seasonal firefighters just for the summer to help them with wildland incidents. And then those structure fire departments will lay off those summer seasonal workers in September or October, possibly November. Usually, structure firefighters just focus on protecting structure and human lives, and wildland firefighters focus on managing wildfires, wildlands, ecosystems, like we talked about. Wildland-urban interface. This is a very important term that everyone should know. Wildland-urban interface can be thought of as the intersection between structure fire and wildland fire. Technically, wildland-urban interface, also known as WUI, is defined as the zone of transition between unoccupied land. You could think of unoccupied as uncultivated or undeveloped land, and human development. It is the line or area or zone where structures and other human development meet or intermingle with undeveloped wildland or vegetative fuels. This is a very good example. You can see this is very, very tall grass or tall fuels. These fuels look to be about 5 or 6 feet tall, possibly taller. And these fuels are right up against this house, so obviously if a fire came through these fuels, this house would be in big trouble. This is a very good example of wildland urban interface, where the urban developed area has intermingled or butted up against the wildland. And here I promised I would tell you more about how wildland firefighters can help with indirect attack on structure fires. So for example, if this house is being threatened by a wildland fire, wildland firefighters will never go in structures because that's what structure firefighters do. But wildland firefighters can help with thinning and pruning trees around this house to get this house ready for the fire that's about to approach it. Because if wildland firefighters can use chainsaws to remove logs or dead fuels or prune up trees or thin out trees and shrubs, then removing those fuels from around this house will help give this house more of a chance of surviving a wildfire. Same with this picture. Wildland firefighters can help with removing fuels, shrubs, dead logs, pruning up trees around this house here in Zone 1 and Zone 2, as well as Zone 3. And that will help give this house more of a chance of surviving a wildfire. That would be referred to as indirect attack. So firefighters are indirectly attacking the fire by reducing the fuel, which remember the fuel is one of the pieces of the fire triangle, as well as the fire behavior triangle. A lot of times, houses that live out in the wildland like this, a lot of times homeowners, if they know what they're doing, they will hire private companies to do fuels mitigation for them. Homeowners who do not work on fuel mitigation around their homes are much more vulnerable to their homes getting burned over by a wildfire in the wildland urban interface. And something important to think about. If your home is in a city and you're surrounded by streets and other houses, this would not apply to you. This just applies to homes that are in the wildland. Remember, wildland refers to uncultivated or undeveloped land. Surprisingly, a lot of homes in the United States do live in the wildland. So in Washington State, between 30 to 45% of all homes would be considered intermingling with the wildland, which is a pretty high percentage. Let's talk about direct attack and indirect attack. So the photos that I have prepared for you are in the context of wildland firefighting. Remember, structure firefighters do also have direct attack tactics and indirect attack tactics. However, the photos I've prepared for you are in the wildland context because structure firefighting is not my forte. My background is wildland. So in this picture, you can see is a good example of direct attack because we have flame lengths that are relatively quiet and low. Less than 3 feet was the parameter or the threshold that we had talked about. And firefighters can engage this fire directly, potentially, although it does look a little steep, so it depends on how many resources are on the fire, etc., etc. The more resources on the fire, then the more able the incident commander would be to apply direct attack tactics. If the incident commander of this fire has limited resources, they may not want to do direct attack. So there's lots of factors that go into direct attack and indirect attack. But this would generally be an example of a fire that one could engage in direct attack because of minimal fire behavior. But one does have to factor in the steepness of the slope and the rough terrain. This would obviously be an example of indirect attack because we have flame lengths that are much more than 3 feet. You can see these firefighters right here are on this road trying to make sure that the fire does not spot over the road. And if they notice any spot fires on this other side of the road, they're going to try to put them out as fast as they can. But this is a holding tactic where the firefighters are just holding the fire on this side of the road and making sure the fire does not get on this side of the road. So holding and observing are tactics that firefighters can use. Sometimes the general public will see firefighters just standing around like this and they think that they're being lazy, when in fact firefighters are making sure that they are successfully holding this road and that the fire is not getting over onto this other side of the road. So let's go over some quizzes. Direct attack or indirect attack? I'll give you a second to pause the video. If you said direct attack, you would be correct because we have minimal fire behavior. It doesn't look terribly steep. There is a slope, but it's not super steep. So direct attack would be very possible for this fire, in theory. Direct attack or indirect attack? Pause the video. Yep, we have flame lengths less than 3 feet here, so this would be direct attack. Although if this tree started torching up, then that would be a problem. If we have some taller brush over here on the right that started going up, then that would be a problem, and we'd have to back off a little bit and go more indirect. Direct attack or indirect? Pause the video. Yep, the flame lengths are definitely more than 3 feet, so firefighters will need to go indirect here and observe, try to hold this road, try to not let this fire come down the road. Just hold your position, maybe back off, get to a safe spot. Make sure if this fire tries to run through these trees, or if this fire tries to run through these trees over here on this side, make sure that the vehicles are pointed out, which you can see these vehicles are correctly pointed out to get down the road if the fire starts approaching. But it looks like the wind is blowing the fire in the opposite direction, so these firefighters are content with observing and monitoring at this point and holding their position. Direct attack or indirect attack? Yeah, minimal fire behavior, flame lengths are less than 3 feet, direct attack. Oh, the firefighters could wait for the fire to creep down to this road and then hold it right here at the road. It's going to take a little while longer for the fire over here to reach the road, so they might go direct and put out the fire direct over here. This could also be potentially a prescribed fire because you have firefighters all the way over here monitoring this part of the fire that has already died out quite a bit because you don't see any smoke over here, but then the smoke is existing down here. So maybe this is a newer part of the prescription where they are facilitating a prescribed burn. You can see these trees have already been limbed up and pruned up, and these trees down here have been limbed up. So this was most likely a prescribed fire. Direct or indirect? Last one. Trick question. Both direct and indirect, because the fire is going to threaten houses and infrastructure down here at the bottom of the valley. So it's important for firefighters to go direct as possible to try to save structures and infrastructure. As long as the firefighters can do so safely, the firefighters will have to go indirect where the fire is climbing up these steep slopes because there is likely no road access up here in this wilderness, although there could be some road access, who knows. But the first priority will always be to protect human life first, and then structures or infrastructure. So probably going direct as much as possible down here to protect structures, and indirect up here and let the fire do its own thing. In theory, there would be no houses up here on these ridge lines, although nowadays anything's possible, which is where wildland urban interface comes into play. People like to build houses wherever they want. So if someone decided to build houses up here on this ridge line because they wanted to have a nice view of the valley, and then their house could potentially get burned over by this fire running uphill towards them. So something to think about. Let's talk about the Wildland 10 and 18. These are, the 10 refers to the standard firefighting orders that wildland firefighters have to comply with. These are non-negotiables. And not only do wildland firefighters have to comply with these 10 standard firefighting orders, they also have to comply with OSHA standards. OSHA is short for the Office of Safety and Health Administration, if I remember correctly. This last one we talked about, firefighters need to fight the fire aggressively, having provided for safety first. I'll give you a chance to read these orders. I'm not going to read all of them, but these are non-negotiables that all wildland firefighters have to comply with for any wildland incident. Hey, look, it's a picture of me when I was with Patrick. The 18 refers to the 18 watch-out situations that wildland firefighters need to understand and be aware of. Some of these may be occurring during an incident, but if multiple watch-out situations are occurring at the same time during an incident, then that's when firefighters really need to raise their situational awareness. Situational awareness is just a term given to the overall awareness that firefighters have of their current safety situation. So, for example, if the fire has not been scouted and sized up yet, and the firefighters are also attempting a frontal assault on a fire at the same time, that's a no-no. Right? Firefighters should never attempt a frontal assault on a fire if the fire has not been scouted and sized up first. Now, if it's a really small fire that's like 10 feet by 10 feet, then yeah, you're going to attempt a frontal assault on a fire that's 10 feet by 10 feet, right? But generally speaking, for most incidents, the fire always needs to be scouted and sized up before doing anything else. Taking a nap near the fire line, sometimes that can occur because firefighters need to have drivers who are well rested for the next shift when it's time to get those fire crews out of the incident and back to camp. There have been fatalities in the past where firefighters have been sleep deprived and they fell asleep while driving back to camp or driving home. So taking a nap near the fire line does occur sometimes to help make sure that firefighters are well rested for driving back to camp or driving back home. But that is a watch out situation. And there should always be other people awake if someone is taking a nap. If the weather's getting hotter and drier, it still might be possible to fight the fire safely, but that's a watch out situation. If there's unburned fuel in between you and the fire, that's a big watch out situation, but it still might be possible to engage in the fire indirectly, right? So in that first picture I showed you of those crew members digging hand line, there was no fire, so there was unburned fuel in between them and the fire. But that is a watch out situation, because if there's unburned fuel in between you and the fire has fuel that it can burn through to gain momentum and gain intensity before it reaches you. There is an old saying, keep 1 foot in the black. The black is referring to the area of land that is already burned and will not burn again. So if you always have 1 foot in the black zone that is already burned out, then you have a safety zone that you can walk to if the fire intensity increases. So you might hear that saying, always keep 1 foot in the black. And that's what they're referring to. Stay close to a safety zone or an area that is unburned or has very low burn potential that you can walk to in case fire intensity picks up. We'll also talk about standards for structure fire. So just like the wildland firefighters, the structure firefighters also have to abide by OSHA standards. Occupational, not Office of Safety, but Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And then structure firefighters also have to abide by their local fire department or their local fire district set of operating guidelines. There also could be miscellaneous standards or expectations that structure firefighters have to abide by. Some, but not all, structure firefighters will apply the Wildland 10 and 18 to their own safety knowledge base. This is not very common on the East Coast, but some of the structure fire departments on the West Coast have analyzed the Wildland 10 and 18 standards and incorporated some of those ideas into their own safety knowledge base. Let's wrap this up. So wildland firefighters' primary mission is wildfire suppression. Then they facilitate prescribed fire, manage ecosystems, facilitate fire-wise preparedness in the context of wildland fire. Structure firefighters' primary mission is rescue and providing emergency medical assistance, EMS. Structure firefighters will always put the safety of the general public first. And then once the safety of the general public has been mitigated and taken care of first, then structure firefighters will proceed to structure fire suppression, hazardous material mitigation, fire-wise preparedness in the context of structure fire. Wildland firefighters are frequently gone during the summer, months at a time sometimes, which is hard on family relationships. Structure firefighters have a predictable schedule, which makes it easier to raise a family. Hey, look, it's a BNSF engine pushing a fire suppression water tank. You can see the hose on the ground where these firefighters have hooked up hose. On the other end of this fire suppression water tank, there's a very small pump that pumps water out of this tank into this hose, and the hose gets run out to the fire. Very uncommon to see a BNSF fire suppression water tank on a wildland incident, but it does happen every once in a while. If you decide that wildland firefighting is a career for you, you might see this BNSF train with a fire suppression water tank once every 2 or 3 years. Very, very rare. Almost never happens. Have a good rest of your day, and hopefully this has provided an informative overview of wildland fire versus structure fire.